All right. Welcome to the Integrate This podcast. We're so glad that you were able to join us. David and I are really excited here to share some of our own uh, errors and mistakes, and to try to show people that we can learn from our own follies as well as anyone else, and we can improve the quality of content that we deliver to our audiences and to our students here. And so our plan here today is to take the common mistakes that Kevin Smith shared with us last time when designing presentations, and then to apply some of the common design principles that can help hopefully fix some of the problems that we encounter in our own work, and hopefully you'll be able to take some of those away and make better ones yourselves. And so we're excited to dive into this here. So let's remind viewers here before we begin what some of those most common mistakes that people have when they are creating and designing their presentations. And Kevin talked about these three: one, that they put too much text on slides; two, that their visuals that they choose to add don't actually add value to what it is, their presentation is based on. And they try to fill all of the space on the slide and not leave any white space, and it becomes too busy for our eyes to be able to navigate the different parts there. And there are things and strategies that we can do that will help hopefully correct some of these mistakes. And so those 7 principles then that Kevin talked about: number one, keep it simple. And you'll see in some of the slides that David and I show, and again, please cut us some slack because we're trying to get better ourselves here, right? We'll be a little too busy. To limit text, we're not trying to write novels on the different slides that we show. And of course, reducing bullet points, which I know is I know is one that I'm going to struggle with here, and one I'm going to show you how I'm going to make some fixes to that too. Then we'll talk about visuals and how the visuals that we're going to use are actually going to add value, and they're going to be important in helping to tell the story of your presentation. We'll show, hopefully, how we're going to correct some of our mistakes in utilizing white space, and again, then trying to bring the design of the overall presentation together so that you're using fonts appropriately and not too many of them, that you're following color schemes that mean something, that when you bold something or you underline it or you use all caps, whatever that happens to be, is that there's a purpose for it and it's a consistent purpose throughout the presentation. And then finally, creating contrast between the text and the background on the slide to make sure that what you need to pop actually pops, the important stuff for those different viewers. And so we'll touch on these different principles as we're going through, and we're correcting the error of our ways. So, David, what other things do you have that you'd like to add to those mistakes or those tips?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good start. And we kind of, with reminding everyone what we had talked about with Kevin, and as you and I talked, and we kind of discussed what we would be looking at in terms of our own uh, designs that we've had. What the viewers will actually be able to see is two good examples, I think, because like mine is going to be more along the lines of there's not a whole lot going on. And so I'm going to try to add some things to it. And I have a lesson on Rome here, so I'm going to try to apply some of the principles. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that these you should try to apply all these principles if you can, but maybe maybe it's not always going to work. And then trying to avoid the common mistakes. And as you see mine, and I'll talk through what I'm going to do. Once we move over to Jeremy's, you'll see where Jeremy's actually has like a pretty good amount of content going on with his. And so it's kind of like rearranging or pulling away some things. And so we have two different versions that we'll show you. So I'll just get started with mine. And with applying the principles that we talked about. I think first though the one thing that you can see with mine in terms of the common mistakes is that I have too much text going on. So if you look here, particularly when you're thinking about presentations, and as he talked to us, it's the idea of having the bullet points, and as a presenter, expounding on the bullet points as you're presenting, and not, putting a bunch of text on the screen that is just too overwhelming, or there's just too much. It's like information overload. There's
Yeah, I
too much
think Kevin,
text.
like Kevin made a great point about that too, that I remember, is that if you need that much text and that much information, then you have a handout, right? You don't have a presentation.
Yeah. Yep.
So think of if you need to get that content out, send it in a different format.
Yep.
Let them read that later on their own.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, the as far as the presentation goes, it should be easily digestible by the viewer, and it's a different format of delivery. So that's one thing we talked about too in our interview with him, is understanding the difference in delivery, in the format. So handouts would be, yeah, a great example of a way to get extra information to participants that are attending your presentation, or students, right? And to then have them go through that separately. The second one is that, like with visuals not adding value. So for this one, I actually put the law of 12 tables. I actually just threw a picture of tables in there, because obviously it's not, while they are tables, it's not really correlating to the 12 tables laws of the Roman Republic. So, having visuals that actually match what it is you're talking about, or make an association to certain things. Um, and then also with mine, I think I'm hitting on all the different mistakes, because not enough white space as well, which I guess almost happens if you are overloading it with text, right? You're not going to really have an opportunity to organize it in a way where you've got space that works with the slide, so that you're, as he talked about, you're drawing the participant's eye in a certain direction with what you put on the slide, and this doesn't really allow you to do that. And so, kind of by default here, with the other mistakes that I've made, I'm not allowing white space in a way that helps the slide as well. And you can see I've just like thrown a picture in there that, okay, great, you can barely see it. It's not really, while this actually does relate to the Roman Republic, it's not really like helpful, or enhances the slide in its current state, right? So with what I've got here, I'm going to try to apply the design principles that Kevin informed us of, and what he suggested that we do. And so the first thing is, the keep it simple part. Um, Again, I think with not limiting text, I've already made it so that it's not simple. So I'm just gonna try to pull up a new slide here and revamp this, what I've got here. So first of all, the one thing that I don't like about this presentation is that there's really no character to it. It's just white. While obviously there's contrast between the white background and the black text, there's just really not a lot of character to it. So one thing that I would like to do actually is apply one of the themes from Google Slides and change this a little bit. Um, you'll notice here too, like this is not a great contrast, the way that it's currently in there. So a simple way to create contrast with this would be to actually make it match the other text, which would be like a white text there. You could, that way it pops a little bit more. If it's black, it's much harder to see, and you're not creating contrast in an effective way. um, I guess there's an argument here too, where you could say I could make this larger so it's actually much more viewable, and people aren't having to strain their eyes to just see the title of the presentation. That's one thing you could look at there too. But for sure, understanding what text to use with other color text or backgrounds, I think is an important point. When we get to the second slide, what you see here is there's a couple things going on, right? One of them would be with the unifying the design. If we start at the title part, because what we're doing is we're actually shifting from, I've got this white text with my title slide, but then as soon as we get into the actual content, you'll notice that my my titles that are heading up each individual slide, those aren't matching. Those are black still. So unifying the design in this sense would be making sure that my titles are not only, like, say the same color so that they're readable, but also, uh, Kevin talked and showed some examples of his own about, um, you know, if you have things that are similar, say a title, they should match, and it's almost like, so the people that are taking part in your presentation can actually associate, oh, that's a title because it looks like the previous title, right? And so, this is a title. Or the example he gave us was more centered around questions and having the questions be a certain font as almost a prompt for people to answer the questions. So this would be the same thing. So all I'm doing here is just that sixth principle of design, which would be the unify the design. So I could go through here with all of my titles, right? And I could change these. And luckily they are all in that Oswald text already. So that's one thing that's nice, is I have them already set up where they're matching text, and then I just had to change the color on them. Maybe you want to move them around, but I think the general principle here is just make sure that like things look alike, and you can have variety on your slide. It's just that you should not have variety in such a way where every title looks different. It's a different size, it's a different font, it's a different color. That's just too much. And I think that just contributes to people getting overwhelmed with the slide, and it doesn't have any cohesiveness to it. It's just there's too much going on, right? When you look at the limit text part, what I wanted to do, we talked a little bit about AI with him, and we've done, a lot of AI things on our own as well. But I just kind of thought, well, what if I take this text and I copy it and I go to Chat GPT and I say, can you summarize this text into four um, impactful bullet points that inform the reader? And I will paste that text here and we'll see what it comes up with. We're doing this live, so I don't really know for sure what it would be, but okay, so we look at this. The early Roman Republic and regal period are at least documented in Roman history, with historical writing beginning only in the late 3rd century BCE. Okay, so I could take and I could copy this over, because I do need to see what it looks like on the slide still. So, and part of it too might just be playing around with it and figuring out, like, is that still too much? If I do what I kind of want to do ultimately is have my text on one side and a representative picture on the other, so that you can kind of utilize the bullet points and make them succinct and then have a visual to go along with it. So what I'll do is I'm just going to we'll take and we'll do Roman Republic. What would be representative of it? Maybe we choose something like this. And this is where I think the playing with the space comes into play, because it's leaving space in other areas so that you can focus your attention on something. But as I'm looking at this, a couple things that I don't really like about it is that I kind of want the title to be a little bit bigger here. Um, and I feel like there's still too much going on with my text here. And remember, this is where you fight that battle of, like, but I need to say all this, right? And I think that's where Kevin told us, like, just include bullet points of things in their smallest form, and then as a presenter, you're talking about those things in detail, right? And don't overload your slide with them. So I almost want to go here and say, um, I need each bullet point to be 5 to 10 words. We'll try this. We'll see. Okay, early Roman history. This is what it came up with from the bullet points. And so this is where, I think actually the chat GPT or anything like it is kind of helpful, because then you can, take this off, and I'm going to just clear our formatting here. So here's what we've got. So now I've cleared the formatting. I've actually decreased the amount of text significantly. And it's not that I can't still talk about those things. In fact, if you want to, as a presenter, maybe you still need like this amount of information. And here's a little helpful tip. The speaker notes, you could put them in the speaker notes, and then you still got them at your disposal. They're just not overwhelming the slide. Now with this, what I think I need to do is I need to increase the size of this so that it's more viewable here. Maybe I go more like around 20 or so there. And then let's see if I can. So this would be an example of how we can take that original slide that I had and make it much more presentable, much more digestible, drawing attention from the recognition of a title slide, the founding of Rome, over to the picture. You could look through these, but you could look through them in enough time or keep coming back to them in such a way where if this is the first topic of conversation, what's nice is if I'm listening to a presenter, right, I go title, picture, make a visual note in my mind, look at the bullet points, or maybe the presenter would direct me to the bullet point, and then my attention would be back to the presenter who would talk about that item more. And I think that that's where you could be much more effective in your presentation by applying some of the things that Kevin mentioned to us. And, like if we go back, I could undo all this and go all the way back, but, you can always just rewind the video here if you want to see what the original looked like. But if you remember, it was like all white, tons of text, really not a good slide. We had like the black text versus the green background. And this one, I think what my goal was to match a little bit of what Kevin was doing with his DSU slides that he showed us in the interview, which was to have a much more focused presentation. One of the things that I'll note too, and I don't have to take up too much more time here, and Jeremy could get us into his, having a couple things. One thing is we would still apply the same principles here, like too much text in this area, but obviously this table image doesn't match, right? So whatever imagery is that you use, it should enhance the information and be related to the information. He gave us a really good example of gravity and the lamb jumping up to represent that. And then another piece that I think is important too is going back to the unifying the design, using things like different text to highlight things, or even using, like in this case, if we clear the formatting and let's say we do this, I'm gonna increase this a little bit. And what if we just said like significant dates of the Roman Republic? This could be another way to unify the design, is that anytime, right, again, when you have a like piece of information, the dates, we could bold those. We could put, bold text there, and then the text that would follow would not be bold, and that would be more the information, and then those would match as well. So again, we have, just to kind of rehash here, keeping it simple, not overwhelming with text or even bullet points, right? There's still an argument I you could probably make that maybe this is still too much information, or maybe it needs to be down to 3 bullet points. Um, Using great visuals, things that actually match what it is you're talking about, making sure that they're clear, they're not, you know, distorted, or that the pixels aren't great, so it ruins the presentation. Utilizing space, and white space is more in reference not actually to the color white, but more like the empty space and how it can enhance or focus your attention onto the picture, versus like if I had a picture here and a picture here and a picture here, I'm taking up too much space. Um, and then, yeah, we talked about unifying the design and creating contrast. Um, so Jeremy, that's my attempt at using Kevin's design principles and fixing the mistakes that I had in my Roman Republic presentation.
As someone watching it, it is so much easier on my eye the way that you have it now versus when you had even your first slides with the just even the black text on the white background, and it was just like paragraphs long, and it was just really it really made my eye feel worn and busy and almost getting tired, right?
Yeah, like
And
that's
then
clear.
even when you change some of the contrast, I know you had the black text with the white highlighted background on some of it, right? And then it went to, I think, like that fourth, fifth slide that you have, it still has it on there. Man, that was really hard to draw my focus and attention on that, because it just made it, I don't know, too much brightness almost, but when you
Sure.
took that away and you just made the text white itself, so much easier to follow along with too. And honestly, the fewer words, I agree with you, the fewer words that you could put on there with those bullets, the better, right? And that's where your knowledge and expertise takes over, and you fill in the gaps with an example, with a story, and if you need to be reminded of that, you're spot on with using those speaker notes too. So
Yep.
cool, really well done.
All right. Now it's your turn.
All right. So, unlike David, I'm starting with slides that I've had and I've used for different professional developments. So it's not really the content here that we're focused on any of these slides, because as David showed, it could be about the Roman Republic, it could be about mitosis, it could be about whatever it is that you happen to teach. But the principles that Kevin talked about here are going to be the same, no matter what that content is. And so I'm just stole a couple of slides from presentation that I've done many times now about AI and education. And one of the things that I kind of like about this slide here is that it definitely shows some of that. And I think you could see some consistency that will follow in some of that unified design, where your titles are going to be in one color, your text might be in another color, but they both pop, right? I like on this particular slide here that there's also a bunch of white space that you could see up in that top right hand corner of it, but your attention gets drawn to a couple of different things on this page. And I think, like David had talked about, it goes from one thing to the next to the other. Whether you go right to the center of the slide and you're seeing what the title of the presentation is, or you're jumping up and you're seeing like, okay, this is coming from ECMEC, who's my company that I work for, right? Or it's to that highlighted part that if I'm viewing these slides and I want to be able to follow along, I can go right to that link and I can be a participant in it that way as well. But this is a good thing. I think most of what I going to show next are my mistakes and how I'm trying to work through and fixing what some of these mistakes are. Okay, so I think mostly what I'm going to focus on are many of the mistakes that I've made in creating slides in the presentations that I have. So I'm going to go to this next one here. And I like to start out this presentation a little bit about what AI is and what AI is not. And you could see here that I've got a lot going on this slide. I've got our branded logo up here that's covering, a good portion of that top left part of the slide. I've got the title here, but it kind of seems to get lost with the rest of the content that's going on that page. I've got some visuals here, but are they really, helping to enhance that particular slide? Or are they kind of getting lost with each other? And then I think there's too many bullet points on this slide as well. So I've got many of these mistakes going on all at the same time. So a couple of things here that I'm going to try to do to alleviate some of those problems. One of them is I think that consistent formatting is really, really important. And David showed us some of his ideas for that. But if you want to fix some of those problems like right away and get your formatting consistent, oh, no, I know. If I go up to the view menu, I can choose this one here that says theme builder. And what it's going to show is the slide master that I have attached to these different slides. And you can fix some of that stuff right here on the master slide itself. Like if you want all of your titles to be located in the same place on every slide and you want them to be the same color, the same font, all of that sort of stuff, you can change that right here on this particular slide. So if I want this to be Roboto size 28, but I want it to be bold, I can click on that bold right there and it's going to apply bold to the other titles on the slides. And if you're going to use bullet points, again, you can do the same thing here for each of these different levels. And if I want to fix them all at the same time, like say I want them to all be size 18 font, it will do that. If I want to use a different font for my bullet points than I have for my titles, I can easily do that and change that to a different type of a font. But as Kevin showed out, again, make sure they're consistent and make sure that you're not using too many different ones all at the same time. Right. And then if I go through and I can rename this to have this template anytime that I want to use it. And you can see that it's going to apply those fixes to all of my different slides once I've done all of those things. So kind of a good way to do it is to make sure that it's consistent in the slide master before you move on with your other things. So I'm going to go back here to this one that I was working on here with all of these different problems, and I'm going to try to fix some different parts of it. One of the things that I thought was happening here is this is just taking away having that company logo on every single slide. I mean, people know from the first slide what your company logo is. So I'm taking that out, and I'm going to go to choose a different sort of template that's not going to include that logo there, but yet it still offers some sort of consistent branding and some consistent color scheme that our company uses. And so that's one way that I've done that. Now, the next thing that I want to fix here is perhaps my title. Having it way over here on the right-hand side, it really gets lost. So I can move that around here a little bit. I can find different ways to align that, maybe in the middle and maybe to center, right? So that it's more into the middle part of the page. And so now it feels a little bit better there to me that I've done that. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to take away here from this is I want to reduce the amount of text and pictures that I have on the same slide. So one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this slide. So I still have these ideas of what I want to come back to and fix in my head. But on the one that I'm going to fix it for, I'm actually going to get rid of this whole text box. And I'm going to get rid of these different ones that don't apply here. And so now I'm going to have this one image along with a little bit of a citation here that goes along with it. And so now when I get to this slide right here, and I wanted to say that AI is not alive, right? I can add that to my speaker notes if I know what I want to say. But people are going to see this as like, oh yeah, why is he talking to this AI robot that is sitting there that doesn't even have legs, and that sort of stuff? And I can talk to my audience then about how this is really not representative of what AI is. And I could talk about how maybe AI is not smarter than all of us, even though in this particular episode of the show, the AI is really trying to portray themselves that way. If I still want to use, some content from this other slide now, maybe I want to take, another one here. And really, all I need to really do here is copy this slide. And I'm just using my shortcuts on my keyboard to do that. So that's why you're not seeing the menu come up. And I'm going to take this image away. And now I'm going to put in the Terminator and put that onto my new slide. Right, and arrange this in such a way that it's going to make more sense. I like to leave the citations on there. I don't know. I'm just trying to give credit where credit is due, right? And put this on here. And again, now I can talk about how AI is not killer robots. And I could do similar things here for the other content that is on there. And so what I think is I've got slides now that are impactful, that are still carrying the meaning that I wanted to get across by looking at my bullet points. But now my audience is going to be able to focus on this. And you know what else they're going to be able to do is add in some of their own prior knowledge and background as it relates to AI in this particular case to help them better connect that content. So I think that's a good way to think of it here too. So I think one of the things that's important about this here that you can see in these changes is that I haven't lost the ideas of what I'm trying to convey to my audience, but yet it's being done so in a much more practical way. One other example of a slide then here I have would be this one here as well, which I thought was really good. And I used AI, I thought, to make a really great visual. And I had this one created and had used it in presentations before listening to Kevin. And now as I go back and I look at this particular slide, AI did a great job. I took all of these different terms in my bullet point and I said, I want you, Dolly, to make an image for me that's going to convey all of these different things into what AI is. And it put them all into this kind of collaged, pieced together image. And I thought, man, this is great. It put together all of these different things. But now as I look at this one image, I get distracted. I don't know which ones to focus on. I don't know which ones relate to those different bullet points that are on there. What I would have been much better doing if I wanted an image about AI robotic tractors and precision agriculture is just to make one of these at a time and then make that image regenerate. And maybe it would have focused in on this one of, it looks like maybe a John Deere tractor there, or maybe, using the drone images of someone, working in the fields and precision agriculture. But it would have been much more effective, I think, in my presentation had I done that. So I'm not going to go through and regenerate a new one, but I know when I go back to fix this slide for my next upcoming presentation that's how I'm going to do that. And I'm going to make sure that it does kind of like go along with what I'm trying to say, but isn't going to be taking away from the content at the same time. Use it to enhance. So those are kind of the things that I guess I really tried to focus on for how I'm going to go through and continue, because I know it's going to be an ongoing project for me to continue to update the slides to make them higher quality.
Yeah, I think it was great. There's a couple of things with pointing out that the templates thing for one to apply things across slides. I think is really important. Um, I would imagine that a lot of people aren't aware that you can build that out.
And it's so much easier to do it before you even start your presentation than to go back and fix them individually on every slide, right?
Yeah, yep, huge time saver. But then like going to the stuff that you were working on, I'm much more of a visual person, and so like with video, images, things like that. I think that one of the things that I really like about the changes is just having you're going to be going through all the different things that AI is not. So then just having the image and then you as the presenter explaining it, I think is much more of like if I was sitting in your presentation, or even just here listening to you about it, right? It's much more easy to focus on what you're saying and make the association to the image as opposed to having the task of reading a bunch of the text. And not only that, but like if you go back a slide, right? Let's say that you started talking about the first item. Well, my attention would still be like, I would probably still be going through each of those individual ones in my head and thinking about them while you're trying to just talk about the one, And so I think splitting them up and putting them into those separate slides and then having, like, if you look at your Terminator one, I like that one the most probably because it's like just dead center and it's I can clearly see it's a good representation of one of the items you're going to be talking about, and then you've got like the white space on the sides, and it's not overwhelming. There's not a bunch of other stuff going on. I just to get to like look at that, take it in, and then listen to you talk about it, which I think is really good. And I 100% agree with the AI image thing. Like right away when you pulled it up and I was looking at it, my eyes were just kind of like bouncing everywhere, which is completely contrasted to when you have just the one image and I can just focus on that image. I instantly felt like overwhelmed in my like as I was looking at
Yep.
this, you know, I mean, because it looks cool, but then when I realized there was like, what is that, 18 pictures? I'm just like,
Yeah, and if I pulled just even one part of it out, right, and just talked on that one little part, it'd be so much more impactful, I think, than
yeah, yep.
getting lost in all of the different ones, right?
100%. If you split it up like you did with the first section there, and you had each of those bullet points as their own slide, and you had like an agriculture focus, and it was just the drone one, like you mentioned, that would be great. Like I think that
Yeah.
would be extremely effective. And
And
honestly,
I guess it's a lesson for me too, just because AI can do something cool, like mash all that stuff together, that maybe that's not what we should be doing with it just because you can.
right, yeah, and I would say like everything that I've learned from the interview with Kevin, and then thinking about what you have done here and stuff, and some of the things that I did, it's like there's definitely something to be said for less is more. Like
Yes.
you can get so much more out of less going on in the presentation and enhancing it in other ways as you're talking about it, or like you said before, handing out a handout that would
Yeah.
be associated to something so someone could dive deeper later on or whatever. But yeah, I think it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm excited to go back and make some of these adjustments and changes, knowing what I know now, right? Which we always have to be able to do in education is we always find out something new, then it's going to affect everything that we do after that. We have to go back and we have to change the way that we've done things. So that's
Yeah.
where I'm at. That's for sure.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching our presentations and how we made changes to those by applying Kevin Smith's design principles. And we hope that you can apply some of those with some of your own work and utilize those to your advantage. Next video, we'll actually be updating everybody on AI tools. I know we've gotten comments in previous video about what's going on with different things in school AI. So the tools that we've covered in AI, so things like Brisk Teaching, Magic School, School AI, and Diffit. Jeremy and I are going to try to cover some updates and what has happened with those AI tools in the upcoming episodes. So make sure you check that out. And also, we would continue to encourage everybody to leave comments below. We'll try to respond to those. And it's a great place for you to make suggestions as well for us so that we can add to the video library that we've got to get you content that you would like to see. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you on the next video.